Hello, welcome to Commerce Today. My name is Joshua Warren, and I am here today actually just with myself. Our recording schedule got a little thrown off this week. I took a wonderful trip to Austin and met with some old friends and some new friends and talked to e-commerce platforms. So I'm actually recording this a day later than usual and by myself, but it's going to be a fun episode either way. So today I want to talk with you all about Lighthouse, which if you've been around e-commerce, web development, performance for really any amount of time, you've heard about Google Lighthouse. You're probably tired of hearing about Google Lighthouse. But specifically, I want to talk about this new race I'm seeing emerge among e-commerce platforms of wanting to be the first to really get to those perfect 100 scores on Google Lighthouse. And it's not without the controversy. So it'll be a fun episode. So Google Lighthouse, if you're not familiar with it, it's an automated testing approach that Google has and a tool that Google has that tests the performance of your website. It can actually test it in a mobile mode or a desktop mode. It can really do a number of different types of tests depending on how you set it up. But at the end of the day, what it really does is give you a score of 0 to 100 in a number of areas. The one that everyone pays attention to is performance, and it's actually the measure that can then also impact your SEO rankings. And so that's actually one of the biggest reasons people pay attention to Google Lighthouse scores is because there's this message out there. And I think it's been proven out from what I've seen from brands that have really elevated their Lighthouse score, that you start getting your Lighthouse score very much ahead of your competitors and you start seeing a lot more organic traffic. There's actually a case study we're going to talk about where they got their Google Lighthouse score to a 100 and they doubled their organic traffic from Google. And that's a lot of free, high converting traffic for them. So obviously the SEO impact is big, but beyond that, one of the reasons that Google prioritizes and ranks higher these sites that perform better is users like them better. So that actually leads to higher conversion rates. So the faster your website is, the more likely it is someone's going to make a purchase from you. So another reason to kind of chase that 100 on Google Lighthouse. But then also, as Lighthouse has evolved and as they've moved into what's called Core Web Vitals, it's no longer just about like one or two key metrics. It looks at a number of different things across the user experience, even including how long it takes before the page can be interacted with, and then also what causes the page to refresh and redraw and things like that. So by improving your Google Lighthouse score, again, you're improving where you're going to rank with Google. You're improving your conversion rate and you're improving the usability and sometimes even the accessibility of your site. So because of this, there is a lot of money out there in being able to tell merchants that you can increase their Google Lighthouse score. There's actually one Shopify extension that got busted that guaranteed you a perfect score on Google Lighthouse, but it turns out what it did was detect if you were running Lighthouse, and if so, fake the contents of your site to get you a perfect 100 score. So you got to be careful. There's a lot of people out there making big promises about Lighthouse scores that can't always deliver. But because of this excitement around Lighthouse scores and how important they are, I'm seeing different e-commerce platforms start to try to race each other to see who can basically get to the point of almost guaranteeing perfect 100s on Lighthouse. And some of the execs at Shopify put out some graphics and feelings recently that I don't necessarily agree with, and I think a lot of y'all haven't agreed with. I've seen some interesting conversations on LinkedIn about it. They, as you would expect, they basically put out something saying, if you want a fast site, you want to be on Shopify, and every other platform is incredibly slow. And it was a little slanted. And from what I looked at it, and even comparing it to benchmarks I've run, benchmarks other people in the community were running, wasn't totally accurate. Now, that's not to say that Shopify is not fast. They've done a lot of work, and really what their marketing really ought to have said, or at least for us more technical people could have said, was Shopify is winning the race on time to first byte, basically the amount of time it takes the server to start to output the contents of the page. And that is an important factor. It's not the only factor though. And actually Lighthouse looks at a lot more than just time to first byte. So yeah, Shopify is talking about this a lot, but then another platform is really trying to take the lead here. And that's Adobe Commerce and Adobe Commerce Cloud. So honestly, e-commerce platforms, including Adobe Commerce and Shopify, historically haven't scored well on Lighthouse. There's a lot of e-commerce sites out there scoring in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, maybe the 50s. But getting into the 80s, 90s, and up to 100 has been a challenge. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that e-commerce sites are just so much more complex than your standard site. I mean, when when you have pop-ups, when you have behavioral tracking, when you have needing the ability to add to cart, check out, all those things. That's a lot more than your average, kind of static site. So it's hard to get those Lighthouse scores up. And that is why both Shopify and Adobe Commerce Cloud have been focusing on this so much. So Shopify, their big thing, like I mentioned, they're really focused on improving their time to first byte, basically improving the kind of the back end and the server side of things so that the sites are faster. That will increase your Lighthouse score, but only up to a point. What Adobe is doing, though, is really interesting. They have released something called Edge Delivery Services. I'm going to geek out for just a minute, but Edge Delivery Services, if you're technical, that name might even kind of clue you into what they're doing here. They're basically combining the idea of a content delivery network with edge computing. So instead of one server or one cluster of servers that feeds into a content delivery network, you actually have nodes distributed everywhere that are doing the actual computation, the edge computing to render your pages and display them to the users. So that actually gives you amazing performance enhancements. And Adobe has actually shared they have had a number of clients that have deployed Edge Delivery Services score those perfect 100s on Lighthouse. And that is something that honestly I didn't think would be easily reproducible. It seems like Lighthouse scores can be so dependent on the site, the design, the technologies they're using. But Adobe has really apparently found something here that allows them to deliver this again and again and again. It's a little bit interesting. I will link to the documentation for how to use EDS or Edge Delivery Services with Adobe Commerce. I say it's a little interesting because it was originally built for Adobe Experience Manager. And so when you use it with Commerce, there's certain features they're starting to roll out over time. So one of those being that content authoring, you can't use the CMS features you're used to in Magento and Adobe Commerce. Right now, there's this document-based model that they're using where you actually create your content and Google Docs, Microsoft Word, other tools like that. Those actually sync into Edge Delivery Services, and that's how you update it. In some ways, it's nice. I think that's an interesting approach because now you're not having to teach your content team how to use a specific CMS for your e-commerce platform. You can tell them, hey, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, whichever your company is standardized on, just go use that. Build out all your content there, and then sync that into the Edge Delivery Services system. So yeah, it's really interesting, and I am pulling up another link I'm sharing is to a case study that Adobe has shared. They actually shared this last year and then shared more about it at Adobe Summit. I would encourage you to read it if you haven't yet. It's all about Hanes brands and one of their sites, Maidenform. And they were, I think, the first to launch on Edge Delivery Services. My favorite part of the story is they actually had issues after they went live on Edge Delivery Services because the site was too fast. And that just sounds like something a marketer would make up, but it's true. The site was so fast that the systems they had in place to try to detect abnormal user behavior went crazy because users were able to interact with the site so much faster than they could before. And they share that you can actually go to the homepage, go to a category, go to a product page, add the product to cart, and then all the other third-party systems catch up and you finally get the little cookie pop-up or the cookie consent banner. And so basically the site started performing so fast that a lot of the other technology wasn't keeping up with it. So, and that has not only greatly increased their conversion rates just because the site's so much faster, but their organic traffic is just way up and their SEO rankings are way up because they are so much faster than all their competitors now. I thought that was interesting. And not everyone has the resources of Hanes brands, but I thought it was an interesting way to address the challenges around Google Lighthouse scores because so many brands out there that I've talked to even said, hey, we've given up. Like, we know our Lighthouse score is as good as it's going to get because we're an e-commerce brand. We have a lot of complex interactions on the site. We're just not going to get any further than that. We're just happy with the score we have. At least we're in the average. And there's some leadership at Hanes that basically said, no, we want to set the standard for what's possible. And they worked with Adobe to develop and deploy this technology that is really going to change how e-commerce sites are delivered in the future. It is an enterprise level tool right now. I know that Adobe is working on ways to make it more approachable for smaller businesses, but right now it is something you have to be on Commerce Cloud and have a certain size business to qualify for and to use. I do think that it will roll down to smaller brands in the future. And if it doesn't, I suspect that there are other platforms out there that are watching this and saying, wait, we can develop an edge delivery approach as well. So just like PWAs 5 or 6 years ago, I think now a lot of people on the front end side are going to be talking about edge delivery. It's almost like the DevOps approach to front end, if you ask me, meaning that it combines server architecture and really DevOps, a DevOps approach with front end technologies. And so there's just some interesting things that I think people are going to be able to do. I haven't seen any open source solutions yet doing edge delivery. I suspect I'm going to keep an eye on the Medusa project. I think that if anyone's going to be close to it, it could be them. Of course, I'm always pulling for Magento open source. So who knows, maybe there'll be someone that can develop a similar technology and approach for open source, Magento open source. And if so, I will definitely shout that from the rooftops. Speaking of Magento open source, I couldn't have an episode about Google Lighthouse scores without mentioning one other solution. So for both Magento open source and Adobe Commerce Cloud, there is a wonderful technology out there called Huva. It took me like 4 years to learn how to get their name right. And I think they've only been in business for 4 years. Finally got it. It's HYVA, and I will link to it in the show notes for this episode. Huva is it's not edge delivery, but it is a different approach to a Magento front end that, when implemented well, does deliver Lighthouse scores approaching it up to a 100. And so if you're looking for a way to get your performance up to that level, and you are on Magento or Adobe Commerce Cloud, and edge delivery services just isn't on your roadmap, isn't within your reach right now, I would definitely recommend looking at Huva. It's not only much faster, it's a lot simpler to develop for than either the old Luma-based system in Magento or PWAs and PWA Studio. So I even feel like unless or until someone creates edge delivery services style delivery for Magento open source, we're really going to see across Magento and Adobe Commerce, the standard being you're either using edge delivery services or you're using Huva. So that would be what I would be looking at if I was in the Magento or Adobe ecosystem. In the meantime, over on the Shopify side, I know they're doing quite a bit around performance and also specifically around checkout performance and checkout technologies. So who knows, maybe we'll see an edge computing based announcement from them soon. And then, of course, there's always BigCommerce, which hopefully sometime soon we will get some news on, are they being acquired, who is acquiring them, and who knows, depending on who acquires them, then what kind of company it is, I could see there being an interesting play there for them to go into an edge delivery model. But for now, if you want a big name e-commerce platform and you want edge computing and edge delivery, your one choice is Adobe Commerce Cloud. So sorry, Shopify, you're not quite there yet, despite what you have been sharing on social media. So that is all about Google Lighthouse scores and kind of this race I'm seeing between the e-commerce platforms around Lighthouse. We do at Creatuity have a performance auditing service. So if you have some questions about your site's performance or some challenges, then reach out. And for people that listen to this episode, mention this episode, we can even do a free or low cost audit depending on the situation you're in and what you need help with. So definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're interested in that. The other thing I'd like you to do on LinkedIn, well, first of all, follow me if you haven't yet. I'm Joshua Warren on LinkedIn. I have the gold Creatuity background color behind my headshot, so you can tell me from the, 30 other Joshua Warrens on LinkedIn. But while you're on LinkedIn, stroll over to my profile and either DM me or find one of my recent posts about web performance and just share with me kind of how is your site performing? What sort of Lighthouse scores are you seeing? Are you happy with them? If you don't mind sharing, share what platform you're on. I'm kind of curious to get some more real world data from merchants that are actually kind of fighting this performance battle and this reach to get to a Lighthouse score of 100 and see if there's any trends among the platforms. Because again, everyone's just saying, all the platforms are saying that theirs is the best, theirs is the fastest, and so often that doesn't really necessarily play out in real world scenario. So thank you for watching or listening today. You can find these episodes on YouTube under Creatuity. We post them on LinkedIn under my personal LinkedIn, as well as the Commerce Today LinkedIn and any podcast app under Commerce Today. And I will see you back with Darren in the not too distant future.